respects to elders past and present. In terms of apologies, we do have 2 apologies this evening, Councillor Dan Loden and Councillor Suzanne Warner. And we are expecting Councillor Wallace and Councillor Ipolo, but we do have 5, so we can commence the meeting. So we will go to public question time and receiving of public statements. For those who may not have been to a meeting before, we just ask that you come up to the microphone. There's no set order. Just state your name, the suburb in which you reside, and the item that you wish to speak to this evening. And we do ask to, we do time to 3 minutes. So if you can try to keep your comments to within that time frame, that would be fantastic. So I welcome the first person to come forward.
Good evening, Glenn Christie from Mount Lawley. Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Firstly, I'd like to speak to regards to the petition on tonight's agenda to have my support to the implementation of residential-only permit parking on Harold Street and traffic management. Secondly, I'd like to speak to agenda item 10.1. Vincent Street from Beaufort Street through to the Mitchell Freeway is a main roads distributor road. However, the residential section between Beaufort Street and Throstle Street is only single lane, contains speed humps, at Norfolk Street, centre plantings and now mature trees, with the remaining sections all 4 lanes. My first question is, why is the section between Beaufort and William, that is identical to the section adjacent to Hyde Park, still a 60 km/h zone and not mentioned in tonight's agenda item? I have contacted both the Office of the Minister for Transport, the Honourable Rita Saffioti, and the Member for Perth, the Honourable John Kerry, who have both indicated support for a reduction in the speed from 60 km/h to 40 km/h, subject to the city's support. My second question, can the city please review the current anomaly that exists with this section where a speed limit has not been consistently applied when compared to other distributor roads, such as Bulwer and Oxford Streets, both 40 km/h, and request an expansion of the 40 km/h limit to include all residential sections of Vincent Street that are single lane. I ask the councillors to consider an amendment to agenda item 10.1 tonight to include an additional recommendation to Main Roads WA to reduce the limit on Vincent Street between Beaufort and William Streets to 40 km/h. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Louise Schneider and I'm here to present 2 public statements about petitions we have given to council for residents who reside between Beaufort and Vincent Street, Harold Street, Small End. Firstly, the resident parking petition statement. Our section of Harold Street is a 24/7, 2-hour free parking zone. Compared to many nearby residential streets, this section of Harold Street is quite unique. It is narrow with no intersecting side streets, has no laneway access to the rear of the residential properties. Some residents have only 1 car bay or 0 off-street parking available, so we rely on street bays. During the construction, following the opening of the Beaufort entertainment venue and the ongoing construction of the Chalice 539 mixed-use development, it has become extremely difficult and often impossible for residents to find parking. Available parking is often close to capacity, both during the day and the evenings. During the weekdays, construction employees from the Chalice apartments block all the parking, and at weekends and weekday, day and night, due to the Beaufort employees and general patrons using the street as long-term free parking. Parking availability has become severely restricted. Residents are often forced to park in other residential streets or illegally park on private property, such as the Sacred Heart Primary School. Enforcement by rangers is insufficient to become a deterrent, with offenders knowing the likelihood of infringement is low. The Beaufort was approved with 0 parking for staff or patrons, forcing both to find parking on adjoining residential streets, especially ours. Completion of the Chalice development will simply replace the construction workers with new residents, business owners, and their visitors who will compete for our parking. This development is now unreasonably, we feel, seeking a variation to remove all its visitor parking. We acknowledge that Parking issues are not unique to the City of Vincent, and changes to parking regulations are rarely implemented. But we feel precedence has been set in similar residential streets, for example, adjacent to the Paddington Hotel and the Oxford Hotel in Mount Hawthorn. Additionally, we note adjacent Mary Street has restrictions to support residential parking to meet the needs of residents. It is our opinion and request that the residential parking zone proposed by our petition would create a reasonable sharing of parking, but ensure availability for residents. That's addressing the first petition. The second petition is regards traffic management of the same area of Harold Street between Beaufort and Vincent Street. As a narrow inner city street, this section of Harold Street really was not designed to support the current traffic volume. When occupied with parking on both sides of the street, it becomes a single lane, impeding safe flow. Private driveways and crossovers have become turning points or illegal parking bays. Ubers and party buses also block the street, using it as a drop-off or collection point for their passengers. As a shortcut between two major main roads, Beaufort and Vincent, this section has become a rat run, with observational speeds often appearing to exceed 40 kilometres, the 40-kilometre limit. We request that the council consider making this section of Harold Street a one-way configuration exiting onto Beaufort Street as nearby Mary Street the same. Finally, when you consider both petitions, which we feel are joined, we would like to assure the council that this residents group is not trying to bring a not in my backyard action. All of us live in our street because of its vibrancy, its closeness to Beaufort Street and all those things. But as outlines, we feel our lives have been negatively impacted by these issues, detrimentally reducing our amenities for almost 2 years since the Beaufort starting to be built. We are also of the opinion that implementation of both requests.
Louise, I know you're trying to cover off a lot of information.
I've almost finished.
Yes,
because
that's,
it is for two petitions.
yes, okay.
But we would also feel that if you could implement some of these things, the marked increase of antisocial behaviour in our street could be reduced. People using front gardens as toilets. Last Saturday, I came home by myself and had to remove 3 drunken men from my, my front gate before I could get in. Not very nice. So we would just appreciate if you look at our petitions, and if you want to meet with the residents, we would all be very happy to meet, make a meeting to see you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Leslie, and also happy to meet and discuss further with you. Next speaker, please.
Yeah, I'm Linda Harris from Leederville. My concern is the lack of signage for the pedestrians in Britannia Reserve. This is becoming an increasing problem, with the number of e-scooters in particular increasing, plus cyclists and of course the e-skateboards. There are a number of elderly people who use this, and as you know, it's a nursing home abuts onto the park. Apart from this, the elderly, there's the people in the mobility scooters, women in prams, and little toddlers learning to walk. I can give you an example. Yesterday, or a couple of days ago, there were 3 adolescents racing down the dirt track, but one was on the bitumen track in the park. And when I asked the boy in the park to slow down, the 3 of them came back and went faster. We're not concerned about children under 12. We're very happy for them to ride because most of them are extremely polite and go slowly, but it's the teenagers and now the increase in electronic scooters that really worry us. The council can put signage up. The main roads has that provision. This is Bayswater Reserve, which has a sign, pedestrians only, and it works, I think, very well the times I go there. There actually is a sign within the reserve, but it's just in one little corner. That's the sign we already have. We would be delighted if something like this could be put up, and put it in an ad just at the bottom, except for children under 12, that we find that makes it safe for kiddies riding to school. But at the moment, it's not a safe area, and we certainly hope something can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Just so you know, your motion to the AGMA will be, there'll be a full report back on that. And I think we're due to consider that at the March council meeting. Yep. Thank you, Linda. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Leslie Flory from SASAV in Mount Hawthorn. As some of you may be aware, I have a major piece of City of Vincent infrastructure, being a massive 900mm diameter stormwater pipe running through my property. Inclusive of the flange, the size is 1.2 metres in diameter. Settlement in Mount Hawthorn was in the 1920s and 1930s. Anzac Cottage was built in 1916. These main stormwater pipes are over 8 decades old and require replacing, maintenance and repair. I have a number of concerns, questions and a request. Probing has been conducted on my property and has found the area around the stormwater pipe has not been compacted. I have movement of stormwater pipes. Also during winter, the stormwater pipes swim in the water table. Movement of these old pipes leads to a significant risk of cracking and leaks. I'm also concerned about the number of pipes and the number of joins in the main stormwater pipe on my property. The length of my property runs 31 metres to the back fence. I have approximately 13 large pipes and 14 joints with a circumference of over 3 metres. Therefore, I have approximately 44 metres of joints on my property. You would be aware that the joints are the most weakest points in these stormwater pipes. Questions: what are these joints made of? Rubber rings, deteriorating cement? What's the service life of these joints? As noted in the GHD drainage memorandum, risk management is high. There's a large number of drain infrastructures which runs through private property, some of which are not accessible. Failure of the stormwater drainage systems within these locations or maintenance issues may result in significant damage to property. I request the City of Vincent deliver one 900-metre by 2.4 metre long stormwater pipe with a flange onto my property in the position jointly marked by my surveyors and the surveyors of the City of Vincent. The sheer size of this stormwater pipe is required for viewing purposes to educate and enhance the community awareness, also for transparency. The matter of the stormwater pipe on my property has now become urgent. I do have a solution and will share this once I have additional information that becomes available, which I requested early in January through the Freedom of Information. I would be happy to meet with you, Emma, at that particular point so you can visually see how the impact is on my property. Yeah. I also have a question. What is the infrastructure on the corner of Brady and Bonneville Street in Mount Hawthorn? Is it a pumping station? Can you provide some details of the infrastructure, the purpose and the works of it? The other question is, as in the Perth Now, dated 13/1/2023, there are upgrades that will start in Linton, East and Sass Ave in Mount Hawthorn, which have been identified as priority projects. What are the upgrades? And in closing, the ageing stormwater pipes and joints are deteriorating and are past their service life. The stormwater pipes are not coping with the capacity of water. The City of Vincent have a duty of care to residents and their property. This matter needs to be addressed urgently before underground power is installed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. We have received 2 of your questions in writing, but you've asked some additional this evening, and I would be happy to meet with you on site if that's what you'd like to happen.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Any further speakers this evening?
Dudley Meyer Highgate. I'm speaking on 10.1, the 40K trial. You do trials to see if things work or they don't work. And as I said last week, if the intention of the trial was to produce a noticeable reduction in traffic speed, it's been an abject failure. But that's why you do trials, to see what works or doesn't work. So what did we learn? First of all, the GHD report said that the mean speed and the 85th percentile speeds dropped by about 1 kilometre. It's not very much. The first recommendation from the PJA report is to implement a 30 wide kilometre speed zone on all local roads. The Stantec report says the trial had little or no effect on rat running. It further says vulnerable road users, which are children and the elderly, would require further interventions to reduce speed limits by 10 kilometres per hour to feel more confident walking, cycling and using mobility aids. It also says there was a perception that local roads are more livable, and that's the crux of the move to 40K. It's all about perceptions and not actually making the areas much safer. The accessible city strategy says that one of the opportunities is to go to 30 kilometres on residential streets to allow significantly improving road safety outcomes. And that's residential streets, not the distributors, it's the local streets. Safe active streets are all 30 kilometres per hour, which implies 40 kilometres and above isn't safe. Otherwise, why would you use 30 Ks rather than the 40 Ks as the limit? Overseas experience has shown that the trend is to 30 Ks on local roads. Joondalup implemented a trial to 30 Ks and it showed that it had minimal impact on journey times, but offered significant improvements in road safety and pedestrian amenity. So why can't we? So you've got to look at the results and see what can be improved rather than just keep on doing the same old, same old. The recommendations in the report are also very confusing. It recommends seeking approval for a permanent drop to 40 Ks in the trial area, yet there's an attached map which is at odds with that. It's not referenced anywhere in the report. It shows that Bulworth Street and Smith Streets are going to 50 Ks. So is that the intention of the staff? It also talks about Vincent Street next door to Hyde Park going to 60 Ks. Is that the intention? They're addressing Glenn's problem by speeding up near Hyde Park rather than dropping it near him. So I think this report is very deficient. I think you've got two choices. You can continue along do the minimum and just manage perceptions, or you could make a difference and lead the way. And the second option requires you to show some leadership. I've seen the amendment that Councillor Hallett has proposed. It's confusing. 3 and 4 seem to be at odds, and I don't think it goes far enough. So I urge you to think properly about this, come to some understanding of what this map actually is intending to mean, and actually trial something out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dudley. Are there any further speakers this evening? Okay, thank you all very much for your comments. The matters that have been raised will come to the petition at 5, so that will be before we get to the other business, and then 10.1, which has been raised, will be dealt with first by council. Okay, and also just noting, as mentioned, that Leslie had also submitted 2 questions in writing in advance, so we have those questions. Okay, so the next item that we will be dealing with this evening is applications for leave of absence, and we do have 3 this evening. The first is from Councillor Castle for leave from the 7th to the 23rd of April 2023. Are you happy to deal with these collectively as all as one? Okay. Myself has requested leave from the 28th of March to the 24th of April. Post-pandemic family visits in the northern hemisphere rather, and Councillor Warner has requested a leave of absence from the 15th of February to the 28th of March 2023 due to medical reasons. So can I have a mover and unless there's any questions? Mover and seconder, do you have a question? No, you're happy to move it? Moved by Councillor Alexander, seconded by Councillor Wallace. All those in favour? Declare the leave request carried. We then have item 5, which is the receiving of petitions, deputations and presentations. And Louise Schneider has given us a very good rundown of those 2 petitions. But for the record, would you like me to read out the wording of the petitions? Yep, okay, I will. It's quite lengthy, and thank you, Louise, for giving us a good rundown there. So the first petition with 26 signatures was submitted by Louise Snyder of Mount Lawley, requesting that council investigate and resolve to the resident owners' satisfaction the issues identified by and of ongoing concerns to the residents owners of Harold Street, Mount Lawley, between Beaufort and Vincent Streets regarding traffic management, specifically congestion, safety including dangerous driving, lack of adherence to the 40 km/h speed zone, and potential risk to children living in the street and students attending Sacred Heart Primary School. The development application variation by the Chalice Apartments of 539 Beaufort Street to revoke the on-site internal visitor bays may also add additional stress to traffic flow and may adversely impact the already difficult resident parking concerns. So we'll deal with them both separately. So councillors, we have the option to receive the petition, and ask administration to prepare a report, that we receive the petition and refer it to the committee, or that we receive and deal with it this evening. My advice would be, as we'd normally do in this situation, where we will have to seek infrastructure's advice, look at on-street parking, look at data around speeding, etc., that we would refer this, that we'd receive and ask for a report to be prepared. Is there any other view that we wish to propose a different way? Okay, well then I will put that in relation to 5.1, that the petition be received and a report be prepared. Can I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Castle, seconded by Councillor Hallett. All those in favour? I declare that carried. And in the meantime, happy to come and meet and have further discussions on this item, but that means that this will come back to council as a separate item with a full report, and that can be further discussed with residents. So in relation to 5.2, the second petition, a petition with 26 signatures submitted by Louise Schneider of Mount Lawley, requesting that council investigate and resolve to the residents' owner satisfaction the parking issues identified by and of ongoing concerns to the resident owners of Harold Street, Mount Lawley, between Beaufort and Vincent Streets, by implementing a residential only permit zone from 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. daily. Look, I do think this can be dealt with by the same report, but the same advice would be that we would receive the petition and the report be prepared, noting that would be the same report. Any comments or questions on that approach? Okay, I'll ask for a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Castle, seconded by Councillor Hallett. All those in favour? I declare that carried. And before we move on from this item, I might just ask the manager of infrastructure a potential time frame on this report coming back to council.
Through the chair, we probably can get the report for the next council meeting. That should be fine.
Thank you. So we're hoping for March. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So we move then to confirmation of minutes, and these are for the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 13th of December 2022. Can I please ask for a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Castle. All those in favour? The minutes are adopted. Announcements by the presiding member. Well, I must admit I haven't prepared any this evening. It has been very good to be back, I'll say that, and for work to be commencing again and to have some issues. This has been a quiet agenda, but I think that we're really starting to commence work on it, to get some runs on the board. There's been a few issues that have come up along the way, including meeting with departmental people about heritage matters and Litter Stadium. We're preparing for the World Cup. We're very excited about that. We have the Perth Soccer Club proposing that we have a mini World Cup for all of our local school students, which is really fantastic. And we have some really great events coming up. We have some events that we haven't seen for a long time. I'm extremely excited that St. Patrick's Day is back after missing 3 years due to COVID. They've been in that really unlucky spot where COVID seems to have peaked for 3 years in a row. So that's fantastic. Hyde Park Fair is coming back, Neon Picnic. So yeah, it's really exciting to see event season kicking off again. And anything else, CEO, that I should be mentioning at this stage? Oh yes, that's a very important one. Thank you for reminding me. Look, we have had the unfortunate situation where the shot hole borer has made it to Vincent and has been particular having times in Hyde Park. We have been working really closely with DPIRD on that matter. We've been trying to get communications out to our residents about what to look for and which exotic species in particular are at risk. And we've also asked them to be very mindful of our trees of significance on Mary Street. So that has been something where there's been some quite significant pruning of our exotic species at Hyde Park. The only way, unfortunately, to treat the shot hole borer. So that liaison continues with DPIRD, and our communications out to our residents are ongoing on that one. Okay, declarations of interest, CEO.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just the one declaration, which is from Councillor Iapolo, as outlined last week. It is a potential proximity interest in relation to the monthly financial statements and authorisation of expenditure reports, to the extent that these items may include expenditure constituting development, maintenance or management of land or facilities on land relating to the City of Vincent Administration Building and or the Leederville Early Childhood Centre at 244 Vincent Street. To the extent these items are included and recognised during discussion and not identified by administration in advance, Councillor Iapolo will declare an actual proximity interest and excuse himself while those aspects are discussed, unless the majority of council is content for Councillor Iapolo to remain in the chamber but not participate in such discussion. And have discussed with Councillor Iapolo, that's just for the record for council. We're not aware of anything in those reports in this agenda specifically related to the maintenance and development of this building or early childhood centre next door, but we'll make council aware of that if it comes to our attention in future meetings.
Thank you, CEO. So no action required then at this stage because we don't have an actual proximity interest. Okay. Just okay. Thank you, Councillor Iapolo. Any further declarations of interest? Any late declarations? Okay, there's not too many items to declare interest on this evening. Okay, thank you very much. So we will then move to dealing with items on block. So we've had item 10.1 raised. The petition items we've already dealt with. So that leaves 10.1, which is going to be called out for debate. Councillor Hallett, are there other items that you wish to call out?
9.1.
9.1, thank you. Councillor Castle, Councillor Wallace, Councillor Iapolo. Yep, 9.2, Councillor Alexander, Councillor Gontaszewski. Nothing further for myself. So if I can just have a moment to liaise with the CEO.
Through you, Mayor Cole, 3 items have been pulled out for discussion and debate. So the other items are being proposed to be moved en bloc, which include items 9.3, items 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, 11.4, 11.5, 11.6, 11.7, 12.1 and 12.2.
Could I please have a mover and seconder for the en bloc items? Moved by Councillor Castle, seconded by Councillor Hallett. All those in favour? Thank you. The en bloc items have been carried. So the first item that has been raised this evening in the public gallery, we'll go to that first, that being 10.1, update on expanding the 40-kilometre speed zones within the City of Vincent. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I am supportive of the move by the city to continue progress on reducing vehicle speeds on local roads. I appreciate the comments from the gallery in relation to the benefit of a 30-kilometre-an-hour zone, and I have thought a lot about this in the week that we've just had, and I cannot bring myself at this point in time to support a move to 30 kilometres an hour, largely because we've spent so much time consulting on 40, but I do really think that that's where we need to head to. However, I think this is a stepwise approach. We do have to work with state agencies, and we have to engage positively and I guess bring everybody on the journey with us. So my thoughts overall is that I am supportive of the move from the trial areas to a permanent 40-kilometre-an-hour zone within the current trial map area, and I'm certainly supportive of applications to progress towards a 40-kilometre-an-hour speed on all local roads that are currently posted at 50 kilometres an hour. I did just have a question in relation to what the questions that were raised in the gallery, and I guess also some question I had around the wording of item 2 in the recommendation. And I think my reading of it is that these applications would relate to all roads that were included in the 40-kilometre-an-hour trial, and that we would then be making applications for permanent conversion of all of those roads. Can I just get some clarification on that? And I know that the map sort of does differentiate between some different roads, but it isn't referenced in this recommendation. So I just wanted to get some clarification from administration on that one.
Through the chair, it's all local roads will be applied to be a permanent 40 from 50. The attached map shows an overview of the city of Vincent, where the trial area is located, plus the 2 areas in North Perth that we've put applications to become permanent. So the purpose of that map is just to show an overview holistically throughout the city of Vincent on these locations. It's only local roads, so distributing roads or primary distributors won't be included. So it's just the local roads.
May I just be a pedant and just get clarification for myself that what we're talking about here is both local access roads and local distributor roads rather than primary distributor roads. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, nothing further from me. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hallett.
Nothing further. Agree with the comments made, and just to flag an amendment.
I do take the point that it's not entirely clear, and I can't move amendments, but I just wondered whether, I just wanted to check, because this is my understanding of clause 2, that it effectively means approves the progression of formal applications to Main Roads WA for the approval of permanent 40-kilometre speed zones as applied within the area that has been subject to the trial without change, bounded by Newcastle, Vincent, Charles and the Swan River. Is that correct? We're effectively taking the streets that have been trialled at their speed zones without change and seeking for that to become permanent.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. That would be one of the applications made to Main Roads.
Yeah, okay. So that's a clarification. If you wanted to tidy up for, it's open to council to amend, but that is the intent of clause 2, just for clarification. Councillors? Councillor Apollo?
Just on that point, there's no reference to local roads in that point 2, and that's where it's confusing for me, because to me that reading is that the whole area, both just distributor roads and local roads, is going to be 40 kilometres per hour because there's no mention of local roads.
Councillor Gontaszewski? There was a question? Okay.
I just have an amendment that I feel might provide some clarification. Would I be able to move an amendment?
Are you happy with that, Councillor Apollo? I think your point is, I understand your point. You're saying it doesn't specifically mention local roads. Councillor Gontaszewski seems to be attempting to deal with that. Would you like to hear that? And if you have a further question, perhaps we can come back. Okay.
So the overall wording would be that item 2 would be changed to read approves progression of formal applications to Main Roads WA for approval of permanent 40km/h speed zones on all local access and local distributor roads included in the 40km/h trial area bounded by Newcastle Vincent, Charles Street and the Swan River without change.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Wallace. Do you wish to debate or discuss?
I would just like to get clarification from administration that that this clarification hasn't created any discordance in our views that we have shared understanding.
Manager.
Through the chair's points. So just clarifying, point 1 notes the safe speed trial evaluation report. Point number 2 is approve the progression of the formal application to Main Roads, and that's for the permanent speed zones, and that's bounded by Newcastle, Vincent, Charles Street and the Swan River. Point number 3 is amended to read approves progression of formal applications to Main Roads to progress permanent 40km/h speeds on all local roads which are currently posted 50 with implementation scheduled in 23-24. And then point 4 is
Manager, we're not dealing with that amendment at the moment. We're just dealing with the amendment that Councillor Gontaszewski's moved. That amendment doesn't have any status until it's moved and seconded.
okay.
So we're just dealing with this wording here before on the screen. This is what I've sort of tried to capture previously. The words are slightly different. So we just want to make sure whether that captures the current trial and taking that as is without change and seeking permanency.
Yes, that's okay. That's local access roads and local distributor roads. Yep, that reads fine. Yep.
Thank you very much, Manager. Any debate on this issue? Okay, question? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Can we have that on the screen? Sorry. Is just all local access roads. My question is that local, does that include local roads? Is there a difference between local roads and local access roads? Because I don't understand the distinction.
Through the chair, access roads and local distributor roads through the road hierarchy for Western Australia Main Roads, they're the same. So it's the traffic volumes on the access road would be up to 3,000 vehicles a day, and the local distributor roads would be similar with posted speeds 50 to 60 and 50 for local roads.
I'll ask my question another way. Which streets will not be subject to a 40km/h within this boundary?
Through the chair, that'll be district distributing roads, A's and B's won't be part of the application to make permanent.
So is that Newcastle, Vincent and Charles Street? Are they the 3 roads we're talking about?
Through the chair, yes, that would be correct. That'd be district distributor roads. Charles Street's a primary distributing road.
If I could just ask another question, sorry, on the amendment, we'll deal with that first. Okay, so are there any further questions or debate on the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? I declare the amendment carried. We're back to the substantive motion. Councillor Alexander.
I'm not sure about whether this is the correct time or not, but I just had a couple of comments I wanted to make. And one, I was a little concerned with the speed plan, which was attachment 7. You know, the failure to provide any specific recommendations with regard to that plan. I would like to see some recommendations particularly obviously with the ones that are going too fast. And then also I wanted to request that by May 23, detailing what steps can be taken to address the excessive speed in Joel Terrace, because when you had a look at the speeds doing that, it was on average about 53. And so that, you know, it's supposed to be 40. And I know we put some speed humps and that sort of thing there, but it doesn't seem to have stopped the ardour to speed. So perhaps we could just get some advice from administration on how you might do that.
Through the chair, the city's approach is to look for the 40km/h speed limit reduction, assess over time and ongoing. The weather driver behaviour does actually reduce to a 40km/h speed limit across that area, and also then address those streets which driver behaviour hasn't reduced those speeds, and look at what interventions then can be implemented to try to encourage drivers to reduce speeds, whether that be through physical interventions such as plateaus, roundabouts, or speed bumps. So it really is about setting the environment of a 40km/h speed limit first, and then assessing the impact of that, and then applying interventions where driver behaviour hasn't changed to meet that 40km/h speed limit, to create that safe residential street environment.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, from what I can see, there hasn't been any addressing of attachment 7, the speed plan. And so what I'm requesting is a further report detailing what steps can be taken to address particularly Joel Terrace.
Through the chair, happy to take a request around an investigation for Joel Terrace as to pursue it internally. I understand that there's been a lot of work done around Joel Terrace in the past. The current manager won't be across that. Give Luke an opportunity to have a look at that, and perhaps we can present the outcomes to a future workshop in the next period before June, to address not only Joel Terrace but potentially any other items that have been identified through this process.
Does that satisfy your request, Councillor Alexander?
Yes, if they're going to look at that, that would be appreciated by perhaps by May. Okay.
It is one of our wider roads, local roads, and I think that's one of the reasons why it has some ongoing issues, despite the fact that it has got speed humps, etc. But
yeah, no, I saw that, but it's pretty high average speed. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Any further comments? Yes.
Can I clarify, was Councillor Alexander actually asking for a motion to amend to include those things, or is he just happy that administration is going to be looking at it?
Well, through you, Mayor, I don't think I need to propose anything more if the administration's agreed with a request.
It's on record, and they've said undertaken to do that.
Yeah.
So it remains open to you if you wish to, but you've had an undertaking that will happen.
No, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hallett.
I'd like to propose an amendment to adjust clause 3 to change it from being a trial of 40km/h in the rest of Vincent to progress permanent speeds instead, and then an additional clause that in the instance that Main Roads doesn't approve a permanent implementation, then to go ahead with the trial.
Is there a seconder for the amendment on the yellow? Seconded by Councillor Castle.
Thank you. A couple of reasons for this one. Just in part that we've done a trial, and so we have a sense of what the implementation of it looks like and what some of the results will be. I think it would be therefore useful to just go straight to permanent. We did hear last week that there was a suggestion that Main Roads may not be keen on that, but I think rather than preempting that, we go ahead with requesting it and then see what happens. And also we've included in the clause to schedule it in 23-24, which will match it to the accessible city strategy objective more closely.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm supportive of this amendment. I think that the intention when we originally conducted the trial in the southern part of Vincent was that that would inform potential permanent move for the entire city. So moving to more trials in the other part of Vincent just seems to slow the process down unnecessarily. I do note the comment this week and last week about Main Road's potential reluctance, but I think we've covered that off with the two options in clauses 3 and 4. So it would be worth trying to push for that, making our position clear, and then see what we can achieve.
Councillors, any further comments? Okay, I'll put the amendment on. Councillor Apollo.
Sorry, I'm not aware of could administration just explain what the Main Roads, the principle of the Main Roads objection to what Councillor Hallett is proposing?
Through the chair, I can endeavour to cover that. Main Roads is responsible for regulatory signage across, including regulatory signage for speed limits. So all the signs that you see with the 60 kilometre, 40 kilometre, etc., is a Main Roads responsibility, albeit that the cost of that can often be with the local government as well. Main Roads would be the statutory posted maximum, I should say, speed for residential areas currently in Western Australia around the metropolitan area, unless otherwise posted, is 50 kilometres an hour. It's understood that Main Roads would prefer to implement a reduced speed limit across a broader area rather than a small section by small section approach, because that means that they have to put a significant amount of signage in those discrete areas to indicate that each of those streets are, or that area is a 40 kilometre hour limit. If it's set at 40 kilometres an hour regulatory as the maximum, then no signage would be required. So Main Roads is looking at it as a cost perspective rather than a road safety perspective.
Another question, has any other local government, are we the leaders in this, or is any other local government doing the same, proposing the same or adoption of 40 kilometres blanket across local roads?
Through the chair, I know the city of Fremantle has implemented successfully a 40 kilometre an hour area in the South Fremantle. So that's the only one I know of now. The inner city councils are really keen to see how Vincent goes, and they're more than likely follow suit. So we are the leaders at the moment in that space.
Councillor Hallett, do you have a question? Yep.
Yeah, just in response to a couple of those answers, just in terms of, are we aware of what Main Roads is doing, therefore, to move towards standard 40 across all areas?
Through the chair, yes, Main Roads meet regularly with other local councils and are discussing 50 to 40 kilometre an hour speed reductions with other councils at the moment.
But not at a state level?
Through the chair, not at the state level within Main Roads, no.
Councillors, any further questions on the amendment or comments? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? I declare the amendment carried. We're back to the substantive. Any further comments? A question?
Sorry, this was just a question in relation to the section of Vincent Street between Beaufort and William, as raised in the gallery. So I understand that that's a distributor road, and that was not included in the trial area as a 40 kilometre reduction. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, Vincent Street is a district distributor A. However, there is a section that runs adjacent, I think, Hyde Park, and that's currently being trialled at 40.
And so that trial will, on the basis, should this motion be approved as it's currently presented, that 40 kilometre an hour section would be applied to Main Roads for a permanent conversion to 40 kilometres an hour. Do you have any commentary in relation to the the question asked by the resident in the gallery in relation to that particular section of Vincent Street between Beaufort and William Street in relation to its suitability or otherwise for inclusion as a 40-kilometre-an-hour zone.
Through the chair, again, not the only section that's being trialled at the moment is the section we'll apply for a permanent speed reduction. The other sections are classified district distributing A, and the speed limits ranging between 60 and 80 recommends with main roads. So no, we wouldn't be including that as permanent.
Okay, no.
Councillor Gontaszewski, I was just drafting something about consultation with those residents.
I would be very happy to hear some wording to consider.
It does involve a question. So if I can just pick up on your line of questioning, if we were to consider consulting with the owner occupiers on Vincent Street between William and Beaufort Street on whether they support being included within the 40k per hour zone on the basis that they are that short section between Hyde Park then leading into the town centre, which is also a lower speed zone, is that something that the administration would support?
Through the chair, yes, we would, yeah.
Then unless the mayor has a form of words that she's already pre-prepared, it's just might move an amendment.
Suggested wording, which I cannot move, would be that we had a new clause 5 that was to consult with owner occupiers on Vincent Street between William and Beaufort Street on whether they support include being this section being included within the 40k per hour zone.
If I may, would like to move an amendment based on that wording. Thank you, Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hallett. Do you need any of that repeated, Wendy? I think it said this. It said whether they support inclusion of this section of Vincent Street, something like that. Is that form of words okay for you as the mover, Councillor Gontaszewski?
Yes, probably the only word that I would add might be trial, because I'm assuming, oh no, we're doing, that's not going to be a trial. No, that's fine.
So it was seconded by Councillor Hallett. Just to speak to it. No, any questions or comments, Councillor Apollo?
So it seems to be contrary to what the answer that I received from the earlier question. The earlier question was that distributor roads would be excluded, and specifically Newcastle, Vincent and Charles. So I'm confused now that if Vincent is a distributor, how can it be excluded?
Through the chair, it's a short section of roads. There is a section of Vincent Street getting trialled at 40 that's close by as well. So administration would be supportive of that short section. We wouldn't be supportive of the entire Vincent Street stretch going from a permanent 40.
So does that require us to, because when we define distributor roads for the purpose of this, I'm assuming you're referring to some main roads definitions. And so do we need to change the definition of distributor roads to specifically exclude this portion of road? And is this the only exception to our definition of distributor roads within the City of Vincent?
Just from a process perspective, I think that the way in which Clause 2 has been crafted to be very clear that it was all roads included in the trial, that's now been carried. So the section of Vincent Street that adjoins Hyde Park has been formed part of the 40K trial. So that would be my reading of it. But Manager, do you think that needs further clarification?
Through the chair, no, I think you're correct, Mayor. Yeah.
Okay, and then this is another short section that leads on from there that then carries into the Beaufort Street Town Centre, which is a low speed area. So the residents tonight have come in to request this. This is a potential consultation.
But the recommendation, unless it was changed, I have to have it back on the screen. It doesn't refer to trial in the recommendation I have on the yellow. So it just talks about a bounded area, not subject to a trial. It just talks about, so to me, it's a blanket. So I just want to understand this because I'm trying to work out the mechanics of how you can, if you're saying that distributor roads aren't subject to a 40-kilometre speed limit, what you're saying now that it can be, is this the only exception and can that work, or is it just by request? So it doesn't go by the main roads definitions of these roads.
Can I just clarify though, this is a separate clause. So this is a standalone clause which specifically states a short section of a particular road. So if this was moved and if this was adopted, that is a standalone clause.
2 doesn't say that. So this is an exception to 2. So are you including this adjustment in clause 2?
No, this is a new clause 5. So we've dealt with clause 2 and clause 2 remains open to be amended further once we deal with this. But this is a standalone clause 5, which stands alone in that it doesn't reference back to clause 2. It's just saying on the basis of the request that we've heard this evening that we consult with residents on this portion of Vincent Street.
If you don't tie 2 and 5, they're inconsistent, in my view, from a legal point of view. I support what we're trying to get here, but I just don't, the construct of it doesn't make sense to me.
Administration, any comments?
Through the chair, the approves the progression to formal application is predicated on the Safe Speed Trial Evaluation Report. So essentially it is based on that Safe Speeds trial and what was trialled, and as a consequence to then leads into all those roads that were trialled will progress to the 40-kilometre-hour permanent, and then we'll go into the next part to pursue the other amendments. The inclusion of the section of Vincent from Beaufort Street to William is probably just a pragmatic approach because it is a stretch of road which is going up a hill quite short, going from a 40-kilometre-hour zone through to another 40-kilometre-hour zone. So it just makes appropriate sense for that to be also 40-kilometre-an-hour. I think most vehicles that travel on it are treated as such unless they're speeding off from the intersection to get into the in the Beaufort Street direction. So from an administration implementation approach, very comfortable of what we're endeavouring to try to achieve here and what we'll approach main roads for.
Okay, my follow-up then is I'm happy to support your representation that this is effective on the basis that you agree, my understanding is correct, that all distributor roads will not be 40 kilometres per hour within the City of Vincent, except for this small piece of road that adjoins Hyde Park. If that's yes, I'm happy.
This is in addition to the small section of road that adjoins Hyde Park, which is existing as part of the current trial. This is an extension from William Street to Beaufort Street. Okay, Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I suppose a question just to try and clarify that further. My understanding of how the process of this would operate is clause 5 is simply talking about conducting consultation. It's not presupposing the results of those consultation. And there would be a further report to council about that to potentially include it in the permanent zone. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
So really all we're voting on today is to consider whether there may be an exception to our rule in clause 2 in the future, depending on the results of that consultation.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I think on that basis, I don't really think there is any consistency with clause 2 and clause 5, because clause 2 is talking about taking a positive action. Clause 5 is investigating a possible future action.
Councillor Hallett, you have moved this amendment, so I'm assuming you're just asking a question. Yep.
I support the amendment, just wondering about whether it will have much of an impact on the timeline of the other clauses in terms of pushing them back.
Through the chair, and there's no impact on the time frame.
Okay. Are we ready to go? You have another question?
I just want the same question. I didn't get a response, and I'd appreciate if we don't move on before I actually receive the answer to my question, which the question, I can repeat it, was that is all distributor roads within the city of Vincent going to not be 40 kilometres per hour, except for this small section of road that is subject to this amendment, which is adjoining Hyde Park and continuing from Vincent Street to Beaufort Street? And a yes will suffice.
I believe the question was answered, but for the record, I think the councillor would like a yes from administration.
I'm going out on a limb and saying yes. My understanding is that the only distributor that that had a 40-kilometre trial was that section of Vincent along Hyde Park. I don't believe any others were subject to that trial.
They will remain at 50 kilometres per hour.
That is correct. Albeit, can I just clarify, this is an application of main roads. Main roads may determine that some roads should remain at a higher speed limit than the 40, and that's really through a negotiation process with them. So they may suggest that some local distributors or local access may need to remain, in their view, at a 50-kilometre-hour speed limit. So it's not a foregone conclusion that this will happen in the form that we're looking at the moment.
I'm still confused. So I'm getting confused between what you're saying the trial said and what the outcome. I'm just trying to understand if distributor roads going forward will remain at 50, like won't be subject to a 40-kilometre blanket. That's what I'm seeking, except for this exception.
Through the chair, the roads that were subject to the 40-kilometre-hour trial will be those roads that are submitted to main roads for permanent approval, regardless of their category.
We're saying some distributor roads will be at 40 kilometres based on this, because I've asked about 5 questions to the effect, and I've seemed to get an answer that is different.
Through the chair, the city of Vincent currently has distributing roads at 40. So Angrove Street would be one example of where a district distributor has a section of 40, and they're generally in activity areas. So when it's built up around the CBD area, the Vincent Street section that's trialled is near Hyde Park. Again, another activity sort of centre where people, I suppose, use extensively, and it's got traffic calming, it's got speed humps. So administration has no objection to add on that section of distribution road within Vincent. We wouldn't be supportive of all distributing roads to be blanketed on a 40-kilometre permanent basis, and main roads will not support that. So that's probably the clarification I can give from the engineering side.
So for absolute clarity, what roads, distributed roads, will not be subject to 40 kilometres per hour? Are you in a position just to list
Can I
them?
just say this is conflating two things.
I don't
We've got the
understand what I'm
trial, we've got the trial area, which we're trying to turn permanent. That's what we're doing in clause 2. In the trial area, the only district distributor road that was subject to 40 kilometres is the section of road adjoining on Vincent Street adjoining Hyde Park. That's clause 2. All other district distributor roads that are of a slower speed have been dealt with through negotiation with main roads to slow down traffic through town centres. That has not been part of the trial. So there's different speeds set, but the way we're talking about the trial tonight, and the only district distributor road included in the trial has been that section of Vincent Street. So all we're trying to do is say that we're seeking to become permanent, and then the small section that carries on Vincent Street between there and Beaufort Street, we're seeking to consult with those residents on that part of the district distributor street, but no other district distributor is affected by the trial becoming permanent. Those other 40K zones have been separate applications to slow traffic in town centres.
So, but what we are being asked, sorry, Emma, that you're getting angry with me. I need to understand what I'm voting for, and I'm confused. So it's very confusing for me. So I don't want to come to the end of the vote and not put my hand up for either, because I don't understand it. So I'm asking questions. So I'm in a position so that I can actually make an informed point. And I'm sorry if I'm not getting it, but it's confusing to me. So I kind of want an answer as to what distributor roads will not be 40, because I don't believe that all distributor roads should be at 40 kilometres per hour. That's where I'm going with it. And so even if that was under a trial, if I vote for this proposal as it's currently written, am I supporting distributor roads at 40 kilometres if they were subject to 40 at the trial?
I'm just trying to give you some indication of the scope of what this decision making is around. This scope that we're being asked to make a decision on tonight is about the trial area going permanent. It's not about speed zones on other district distributors except for this section of William Street. So the question that you're asking is not relevant to the trial going permanent.
But I'd like to know in the trial which distributor roads were subject to a 40 kilometre per hour, because then I am voting for it.
Yes, that is the section of Vincent Street adjoining Hyde Park.
Okay.
That is it.
Okay. Thank you. I think.
Yep. Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Declare that carried. We're back to the substantive. Any further comments? Look, I did intend to make some comments on this one because I think this has been something that has been in the making for many years. When I look back at the time frame, we first started consultation for the trial. Prior to that, we had generally tested the community appetite through consultation prior to that, but consultation improper for the trial commenced in 2018. The trial commenced in 2019. At that time, we thought it would be a 2-year trial and that we might be steps ahead. And I think that is why there's been a keen momentum from councillors to try to keep this moving forward and to try to convince Main Roads to move to permanency without having to go through further trials. It is the case that we are the first local government that has sought to do area-wide speed zone reductions. We're not the sole decision maker in this. We've actually gone through a very partnership-based approach where we've had working groups set up. Taking part has been Office of Road Safety, RAC, WELGA, and of course, all importantly, Main Roads, who makes the final decision on this. So I do think that the City of Vincent has been a leader and that we're continuing to try to do that. There has been, some concern that we might be asked to do, traffic calming, which we know comes at a cost. Whereas I think that, this council and administration has been keen to simply try to reduce the speed and see whether we actually do need to have all the speed humps everywhere. So on the 30K issue, of course, that's probably the gold standard, but we are needing to be pragmatic. And I think when being pragmatic, it's about how best to affect change. And we know that not being the ultimate decision maker on this, and that we also, it is extremely important to bring community along with you when you're making these decisions. And I think community appetite sits at 40 for now. And I think that this is, the way that speed reduction has happened is that we're sort of looking at this being incremental, and that's the way I think to achieve the support of Main Roads as well, because I don't think that we're necessarily going to have their ringing endorsement straight away. It may require some discussion and advocacy, but I think that where we're landing continues to move this project forward and continues to try to get it done in a timely way. So very supportive of this and supportive of the amendments that have been made this evening. Are there any further comments before I put the substantive motion? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. The next item that we're dealing with this evening is item 9.1, which is 119 to 133A Oxford Street, Leederville. Proposed change of use from shop to tavern, including alterations and additions. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by councillor Hallett. Councillor
Nothing-
Gontaszewski,
Nope, supportive of this one.
you're supportive? Okay. Councillor Hallett,
Nothing to add.
nothing to add? The floor is yours, councillor Wallace.
I thank everybody for calling it out. I should have notified everyone before the meeting. I had a good conversation with the manager for development and design and agree with administration's comment that racing, gaming, liquor provide appropriate oversight and assess public health impacts prior to any extension of hours. So I'm happy leaving the condition 2.3 as is.
Thank you. It is the case that all of our licensed venues have the ability to get extended trading permits for incidental use. So not use, but incidental events rather. Yeah. Okay, thank
Thanks.
you. Appreciate you having that conversation. Is there any further comments on this development application, councillor Opolo?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of this because I think that space in the Leederville Town Centre has been empty for a long time, and I think a Indian gastro pub could be an interesting addition to the townscape. I had two concerns, which were kind of alluded to at the briefing session on this one. The first was the disregarding of Vincent's own policy with regards to the requirements of the acoustics report. I'm happy with administration's representations made during the briefing session on that. So we'll let that one go. The second one was to do with the extension of trading hours afforded to the applicant in recommendation 2.3, which requires council discretion as it's a deviation on policy 7.5.7. What this is effectively asking this council to do is to extend the trading hours of this tavern from opening time from 7 a.m. to 6 a.m. Monday to Saturday, and extending the closing time on Sundays and public holidays from 10 p.m. to midnight. To this point, the applicant prepared a public interest assessment submission application for the Director General of the Department of Local Government, Sports and Cultural Industries for the conditional grant of a tavern restricted licence. This material wasn't included in the pack. In that report, the applicant actually stated at paragraph 610, it referenced an Australian Institute of Criminology research paper, which referred to the negative social impact of alcohol-related violence in residential locations. Specifically, the applicant stated and referenced the report that licensed venues that have extended trading hours are problematic for violence in these areas. The applicant then included a reference to a risk mitigation, what do they call it? An applicant's harm minimisation plan at Appendix 4, as an Appendix 4, and referred to it 8 times, where issues about the extended trading hours, that these mitigation things were meant to mitigate the problem with potential violence and alcohol due to the extended trading hours. I couldn't get a copy of that because what I found online excluded the appendix attachment. So my first question to administration, did they actually review that? Because it might be something that is worthwhile referencing as part of the conditions if indeed this council was to support extended trading hours of this licensed venue.
Through you, Mayor Coles, just want to be very clear about what's being proposed. The applicant's proposing hours that would be within the local planning scheme in terms of our local planning policy, together with the Liquor Control Act. Okay, so those are the hours that they're seeking approval for. In terms of the use, the term extended trading permit, that's a separate consideration that steps outside of the Liquor Control Act permitted hours for that particular license type, which is for a tavern license, and that is subject to approval by the Racing, Gaming and Liquor. as part of that approval process, there's submission requirements, and you've correctly referred to the public interest assessment. There's a number of considerations as part of that submission to Racing, Gaming and Liquor that they will need to consider extended trading permits. Okay, so in terms of the city's consideration under this Planning and Development Act and the planning approval that's being sought, we're considering appropriate hours under our planning policy and referring to the Liquor Control Act. So I guess I'm just trying to make a distinction that there's two separate processes. We're not issuing an approval in terms of extended trading permits under the Liquor Control Act. That's a separate process. We are not issuing approval under that. We're issuing approval under the Planning and Development Act as a planning approval.
Okay, but in the agenda item, it's got a table with planning elements, and it says under hours of operation requires the discretion of council. I'm presuming that that's a decision that we need to make in when it's deemed to be in the interest of residents and the public.
Through you, Mayor Cole, there is discretion being sought in terms of operating hours as considered against the city's local planning policy. The matters that you are required to have regard for in making a planning decision are the matters under clause 67, which is the planning regulations, and that refers to the objectives of the zone. That refers to other matters like compatibility and amenity of the area. That is all detailed in the officer report. So yes, you are required to exercise discretion, but those are the matters that you're bound to consider. In terms of the public interest assessment, that is not a matter prescribed under clause 67 of the planning regulations.
Okay, so just two questions to get my understanding correct. So are we being asked under recommendation 2.3, is it within council discretion to extend the trading hours from 7 a.m. to 6 a.m. Monday to Saturday? Are you actually asking us of that? And also extending the closing time from 10 p.m. to midnight? Because that's what I'm referring to.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, there are aspects that discretion is being sought. I'm not disputing that.
And you're asking us to decide whether to grant those two extensions. Yep. And are you saying that in some way the reference I've referred to, which was part of a submission that the applicant made, is not relevant to our consideration for the extension of those hours?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm suggesting that the public interest assessment, which is what you've alluded to, is a supplementary document that is required to be submitted to Racing, Gaming and Liquor under the Liquor Control Act to consider operating hours under extended trading permits. So it's under a different legislation.
Okay, so what are the criteria upon which I need to consider in determining whether, as a councillor on this chamber, whether I should support the extension of our operating hours that administration has recommended?
Through you, Mayor Cole, it's in the report. I suppose everything in the comment section, we allude to the local planning scheme, the objectives of the zone, compatibility and amenity of the area. Those are all the matters that you need to consider.
And not the reports about how extended trading hours can create violence due to alcohol impacted behaviours.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the public interest assessment will deal with health matters primarily, and that's under the Liquor Control Act. Okay, so those are separate considerations. Now, I'm saying from a planning perspective, you need to make a planning decision, and we're bound by the matters that I just referred to. So if you're referring to the land use is not compatible with the area because it would result in undue impact to that area, that is a relevant planning consideration. So I think we just need to be very careful with the way we're framing our comments.
Okay, I think what I'm saying can be constructed in that, like talking about land use, because I think this motion, I'm going to propose a motion. So to change those. So maybe at the right point, I can talk more about why I believe something should change here.
If you'd like to move the amendment, please go ahead.
I would like to move an amendment to point 2.3 of the recommendation. At the first bullet point, amend 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. So not allowing the extension to 6 a.m. opening hours. So that should read 7 a.m. And on the second bullet point, amend 12 a.m. midnight to read 10 p.m.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Alexander.
Okay, I think this motion is consistent with council's position on public health in our town centres and the way in which land is used. We've gone to the point of view of taking smoke-free zones, and that was something that was unanimously passed by this chamber. We also have to consider alcohol. Even though alcohol may not necessarily be served during these times, during the extended hours, it does permit people that have been drinking and may be intoxicated to remain on premises and in that, rather than just going home. That to me can compromise the safety of individuals and families that may also be frequenting our town centres. And in terms of the context of land use, it's something that I'm not willing to support. I do, in summary, I do support this going ahead. I think the Indian Gastropub is something that's going to be a positive, but I just don't see how extending the hours from on a Sunday from 10 to midnight and from 7 a.m. to 6 a.m. It just gives people that have been intoxicated reason to stay in the area in this licensed establishment, whether or not they continue to drink during these hours. I just don't think that this is something that supports other motions that we've been taking with public health. Thank you.
Councillor Alexander.
I did hear administration say that it would appear that the Racing, Gaming and Liquor have the right to determine this, but I would also like to see the council having some right to determine if things are getting out of hand in Oxford Street or in a facility that we could have some say in what the hours are. So, I support the amendment.
Councillors. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Look, I have to say, whilst I am supportive of council continuing to explore its position in relation to, I guess, alcohol use within the city, I also feel that the Leederville Town Centre, being what it is, we're unlikely to see any significant changes to amenity or indeed, I believe, public health and safety that would be attributable to this change. I think Leederville is different to other town centres and certainly is different to businesses that may wish to operate within residential areas. It's a regional centre. I think that's the right classification for it. Thank you. And as such, I think it would have businesses that operate at more extended hours and probably with, larger patron numbers, etc., than other areas within Vincent. So I don't really see a problem with what is being proposed here.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Similarly, I had questions last week around that supply of alcohol, and particularly in those early morning hours, and the potential conflict between the hours being proposed here and the Liquor Control Act. But I think given that thanks for the answers in the briefing notes that have clarified that hours that start at 6 a.m. does not mean service of alcohol can start at 6 a.m. and that they're actually not inconsistent with what else is happening in that zone in the Leederville Town Centre. And I particularly note the comment in the report on page 17 that says that a 12 a.m. Sunday closing time is consistent with these existing venues, including the Leederville Hotel and the Garden, and that 6 a.m. is consistent with Robertson Oxford. So I don't think that what is being proposed is something that is extending the active time of the Leederville Town Centre dramatically. I absolutely agree with Councillor Iapolo that this space has been vacant for a long time and will be good to see it activated. So I don't have a problem with the hours that are being proposed. I think if we were in a different area that was much closer to residential, there'd definitely be a different story, but we're quite clearly in a town centre here.
Councillors, any further comments on the amendment? Have a question?
What other, I don't know any establishments that are licensed that are open at 6 a.m. in Leederville. Can you just clarify that?
Through you, Mayor Cole, that was a restaurant license that was alluded to.
Robert. They're not open in the morning, trying to get coffee in the morning.
Can I just say, like, in relation to this issue, the council's determining opening hours. The liquor licence determines sale of alcohol. So there are venues that might operate as a small bar or tavern, but might choose to have a different offering in the morning.
But the relevant point here is that people who have been drinking all night
What's
will
the
have somewhere to
question?
go.
Because you've already spoken
What,
to the amendment.
what place is open at 6 a.m. that's licensed? Because Oxford and Roberts isn't.
Well, they may not be open, but their opening hours may permit them to open then, so.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll just clarify. In administration's briefing notes responses, we've alluded to the planning exemptions that came into effect through the planning regulations changes. So all restaurants, small bars have exemptions in terms of not needing planning approval. So by virtue of that, they are unrestricted in terms of operating hours. So I just want to be clear that they are capable of operating outside of the terms of the liquor license. The liquor license is only about the sale and supply of alcohol. Okay, so does that clarify it?
Yeah, what I was saying, because you're clearly misunderstanding what I was saying.
If you're speaking, that's not permitted. You just have to, if you have a question, that's permitted.
Is it correct? What's the administration's opinion on this? Isn't it possible and plausible that if someone's drinking through when the opening hours are, they're able to drink, that if they have a place to go, even if the place is not licensed to sell alcohol, that they can still, an intoxicated person can go into that place? That's the point I'm trying to make. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Cole, that's plausible.
Thank you. That was my point. Thank you.
Okay, so we have the amendment before us. For anyone who hasn't spoken, do you wish to speak to the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? I declare the amendment lost. We're back at the substantive motion. Any further comments in relation to the motion for those who haven't already spoken? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare that carried. There was no one voting against. I think everyone had their hand in the air. Yep, okay, that's carried. Okay, item 5.2, 192 Sterling Street, Perth, proposed fee paying car park retrospective approval amendment to approved. Moved by Councillor Gondaszewski, seconded by Councillor Hallett. Thank you.
I'm supportive of the officer recommendation on this item.
Councillor Hallett.
I'm supportive. I think it's interesting the way that it's evolved over time, because I think not having a car park would be better. But I think in terms of what we actually have to make a decision in front of us, I think the officer recommendation is fine.
Councillors, Councillor Apollo.
Thank you. I'm supportive of this as well, but there's an issue here that talks to culpability of councillors. So I just want to talk and raise it, and then I'll have a question for administration. Administration was not aware that the use of the site for paid parking had not ceased and therefore did not investigate enforcement. That was a response from the briefing notes. So my concern is that in many development applications that we're asked to consider in this chamber, that council and administration regularly recommend conditions when considering such applications. And council is providing due consideration to these conditions as to whether to support it or not. And when these conditions are put forward by administration or by councillors, it's reasonable to assume that compliance and enforcement is something we are relying on when we make the decision to support these DAs. If it was known that we habitually do not do enforcement, such that an applicant could, for example, in this case, generate revenue opportunities to which they are not entitled, then that would be a concern that there's no measure in place for the City of Vincent local government to actually do any type of enforcement. And so my concern here is that I take it for verbatim that when conditions are put in something, that enforcement comes with that. And if we're not having that, there seems to be a culpability issue, I think. So my question to administration here is, what can administration put in place to proactively ensure that non-compliance behaviour with these types of DAs, where we have this council or a prior council imposed particular conditions, what can we do to ensure that those conditions don't go unchecked?
Through Mayor Cole, just to clarify, I think we did note that in the briefing notes. So when this approval was first given in 2012, the city did not have a systemic functioning compliance ability to go and check those conditions. That compliance function now is in place, and where there's a time limit approval, our system will alert the compliance officers that time limit approval is reaching its expiry date, and that's when we will undertake the compliance checks and speak to the operator to make sure those conditions are being fulfilled. Potentially an extension might be then lodged, and we wouldn't have these situations which are historical when the city was at a different level of maturity in terms of its compliance function.
Thank you, CEO. So in this case, there is a process that would allow for enforcement. And then generally, because there's a really big issue in my mind, does the city have, in relation to all conditions placed on DAs, what's the mechanism by which it regularly looks to enforce them? Because what I'm concerned about is that as a council, I can rely on those conditions, which includes enforcement for when we consider whether to support or not support.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the mechanism varies depending on the nature of the condition that is imposed. So some of the conditions, like the one that we're referring to now, is about the time limited nature of it. So there is an endpoint, and that is what the CEO is referring to in terms of a system is now around those where a task is generated and a prompt effectively to make sure that compliance is enforced. The nature of majority of conditions are such that they just need to be maintained in time. So at any given time, the operator needs to be complying with the terms of that approval. That is a little bit more challenging. And given the nature of our operation, we are led by complaints in terms of following up some of those conditions. And that's the reality in terms of how we balance our workload and resourcing. So there are different types of conditions that require different types of follow-up, I suppose. The time limited ones in many ways are far simpler because it's a finite point in time.
And my last point on this is that, the community at large doesn't care so much about enforcement of parking tickets. In fact, they'd be very happy, right? But when we're coming to development applications, generally there is a lot of, that they're not always unanimously supported. And so I think people in the community, particularly when development is concerned, are really relying on the mitigation measures that we as a group put in place. And I just think it's an important point that we make, that that the community is expecting those types of compliance to be checked, and that councillors, when we vote, that we can have faith that that the things that we're looking for mitigation is there as well. So that's the only point I want to make. But thank you for clarifying, and I'm supportive of this. Thank you.
Councillors, any further comments on item 9.2? Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Nicole. it's not strictly related to the item, but I am curious about this enforcement system. So I'm just going to ask a quick question, if that's all right. Everyone can indulge me. Is it just kind of like time limited approval conditions that go into this system, or do we flag other conditions around kind of like operational matters that we might consider high risk, or like the applicant to be at high risk of, you know, stepping outside of those conditions that we put on there?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll be careful to not speak on behalf of my colleagues in compliance, but as I was saying before, there's different types of conditions and require different types of responses. So quite often in the chamber, I'll refer to like a residential development. There might be some visual privacy concerns and installation of screening, and that in itself is quite impactful. And can create concerns and amenity impacts. So, for example, it's important when we construct planning conditions that they're valid in terms of including a prompt of when that needs to be satisfied by. So, you know, prior to occupation or consideration through the building permit process, which is the next stage in the development. So that's when not just the compliance team, but the building surveyors, for example, will be considering that as part of that approval process. So it is, I don't want to just put it on the compliance team. I think it's more responsibility for administration to be working collaboratively across different functions and different disciplines. So different types of conditions required call on different types of responses. And I think that each of those responses are slightly, I don't know, call for a different sort of approach. The 5-year one that we're talking about now is one that, yeah, previously we didn't have a system in place, but we've adjusted that.
Yeah, well, thanks for that response, Manager. And I trust the landscaping issue at this lot's on that system for enforcement as well. Cool, thanks.
We could certainly follow up with the compliance team for further information on that if that's of interest, because I think it also came up at the AGME on the landscaping issue. Any further questions or comments in relation to this development application? Okay, I'll put it, all those in favour. Declare that carried unanimously. So we had 3 items of business that were called out for debate this evening. We've now dealt with those, and there being no further business to deal with this evening. I'll thank you all for your attendance and your participation, and close the meeting at 7:37 p.m. Thanks, everyone.